This is a over-the-shoulder, I guess I'll call it, because the camera's over my shoulder, exploration of Warhammer Quest. And it started with the roleplay book that I printed out rather a while ago, and I just used one section of the hazards table in a video I did. And my use of that spurred some conversation with some of my subscribers, most notably the Dungeon Dive, who provided me with some other Warhammer material, some fan-made material, and sort of spurred me on to doing beginning to do an exploration of this system as a role play. As the title of this video says, this is pen and paper, and it's, well, a couple of disclaimers. It's pen and paper. It's solo. It is using the Warhammer Quest rules that I found. I don't have a credit, actually, this Warhammer Quest rulebook. I'm going to make the assumption that these are a transcription of the official rules. I can't know that for a fact. I do not own, I've never owned Warhammer Quest, the 1995 board game. Someday I'd like to, but I haven't been able to obtain it yet. The next disclaimer, not disclaimer, but just explanation, is that I'm going to be using some fan-made characters, but also modified. So, for example, I'm going to be playing the Friendly Giant, and you can see here, I printed this off of, well, actually, I can't remember. I printed this off somewhere, and this is the credit for it. I'm also going to be using I'm going to be playing the Witch Hunter, and I'm sorry, I'll try to stop hitting the tripod. It's a little challenging to work this way. I'm going to be playing, there's a Witch Hunter fan-made character also that I'll be playing. You notice I've placed the word hunter in parentheses because part of my story is that I really want to play a witch, not a witch hunter. So this character is going to be a witch who in her past life was perhaps enslaved or required by some evil entity to become a witch hunter, and that is going to be part of the struggle that this character has as their backstory. And also, I'm going to be playing a young druid. The young druid is somebody with very limited magic who is going to be, in this first part of the story, traveling to, ideally, find the magical place of training where she can obtain some more magic skills. I'm not really sure yet of her whole backstory, but somehow she and the Friendly Giant are the initial pair. They are perhaps childhood friends in some way. There is a bond between them that is quite strong. And along the way, prior to the start of this adventure, they met up with this tortured witch hunter who also wants to go to this magical place, perhaps ultimately be helped by the druid to free herself of the bonds of this huntress aspect, because at her core she is a witch and those are her people. I've made a decision to start the characters at level 1, but at the same time my picking up this story is with the notion that they have been already having some adventures together. And as such, what I'm going to be doing at the beginning is they're going to be setting off into the wilderness in search of this magical place. They will have, and I'll show you how I assign this and do this because it's kind of fun, they will have already had some money and some equipment and things like that. So the first segment here is going to be revealing, finding out what they have, learning a little bit more about their backstory. I already sketched out the beginning for you, and then setting off into the wilderness to see what happens. I mentioned in other videos, I've got a bunch of notebooks, obviously, that I keep for these things. Usually I don't have a dedicated notebook for one thing I'm doing because I tend not to do campaigns, and I, for a variety of reasons, prefer just little adventures or chapters, and then I move on to some other system. Here, I decided early on with this, I want to keep one devoted notebook to this because I am going to carry these characters forward. I'm not necessarily going to carry these characters forward for months and months and months, but when I'm done with this, I'm going to put it away, and I think I will be coming back to it for a variety of reasons. So I've got one notebook for that. I'll also try to keep out a separate, I'll probably keep a separate book for some of the structural things as I develop them. In any case, what I do is in the back of the book, I'm going to be keeping track of the relationships among my party and also anyone they encounter, because this idea that the giant and the druid have a childhood bond in some way, like siblings, but obviously they're not siblings, and the witch hunter is somehow separate from them, that's going to come into play through the story. It could come into play with various modifications that happen. If, for example, the druid is in peril and the giant's going to help, that might provide an additional modification to help or something like that. I don't know. But I find that the relationships among the party are important for me to establish and help me, as I move forward, generate the story and the narrative. So that's just a little bit of a digression. To start out, as an indication that something has happened before we are playing, I'm going to turn to these house rules that I printed off, and here's the credit for them. And I'm going to give everybody something. And I've talked about this in multiple videos, the importance of trinkets in solo RPGing and starting out with something, because it will be able to filter into the story. And what I'm going to do here is I'm simply going to roll on this dungeon loot table, which is at the novice level 1, which will refer me to other tables, and everybody's going to get one thing. Sorry about that. Everybody's going to get one thing to carry. So we'll start out with the well, let's start out with the witch hunter and see. The witch hunter is at a 49 going to be getting some type of a scroll. The witch hunter is going to have some type of scroll, and this is going to be a lot of the tables in, well, all of the tables in Warhammer Quest are basically D66 tables. So we will be reading black and blue as our values here for whenever we roll on those tables. And unfortunately, it might not be so clear on video, but it's at least I can remember it. So black and blue, we rolled a 43 here, which means the scroll that our witch caster or witch hunter has, it's a caster number 7 scroll, and it offers these items, these opportunities. Now, the witch hunter is not a magic user. The druid is. It's caster number 7. The druid is going to only start with 6 magical power. So the druid is not going to be able to use this. Am I going to re-roll? I am not. Why? Because I'm going to be able to sell this for 350 gold. And so that is a possibility for me to do. Or I could keep it at a casting level 7. At level 2, the witch hunter could give this to the druid, and the druid could use it. But for the time being, the witch hunter has obtained this scroll, and it's scroll number 43, and I'm just going to make that reference there. All right, let's move on to the, well, let's move on to the druid and see what the druid is going to be carrying here. So the druid is going to be starting out with 32, which brings us to, oh, a valuable treasure. Okay, we'll take some jewelry. It's a druid. We're going to take some jewelry as what was meant there. So let's see what we get. We get a 16, which is a ring of regeneration. Each turn, a roll of 6 on a d6 heals 2d6 wounds. Unless it's 0, then it always heals 1. That's great at the end of a turn. So the druid is going to have some healing. Now, interestingly, the druid is already going to have healing, because per the druid rules, she's going to start out with a healing spell. That's going to be one of her spells, but now she has even more healing that she can do, and maybe she'll be able to use that on a party member, and that can also be sold for quite a bit, 650. So when we make it through to a settlement or a town, that's when some cool stuff can happen in terms of buying things. But in any case, so this is number 16 on the magical jewelry table, and she's got that. And then finally, our friendly giant. What is the friendly giant going to be having? The friendly giant on a 73 is going to be magical equipment. All right. Our friendly giant is going to be rolling on this table for something that he's got. Magical equipment, black and blue, 61. And he's got a magic backpack. When found, has D6 provisions in it. At the beginning of each adventure, the pack has D6 more provisions. Okay. Now, this is interesting. The giant already, there's a provisions rule with the giant in terms of what he consumes. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I was debating whether or not, let me just write this down before I forget. I was debating whether or not to even bother with this. I have mentioned in other videos that I don't necessarily always bother with basic things like provisions, eating. I just make that assumption, whether I track time, things like that. It depends on how detailed I want to be. For this, I was thinking I would not do that, but one of the giant's special rules had to do with that. So let me just look up and see what that rule was. The friendly giant begins with a very large club and 1d6 portions of dried mule meat. Each restores 1d3 plus 3 wounds when eaten. See below for more details. And the clothing on his back, that's about all he needs, as long as he has a warrior friend. Given this, and given that Magic Backpack has this provisions in it, I am going to be keeping track of this, and I will mark it off and use it to track these wounds. So this is going to be a wound/recovery mechanism for the giant as opposed to a food consumption. So for the giant, I will be keeping track of this. For the other characters, I'm not going to be keeping track of provisions or things of that nature. I'm also, I'll tell you now, not going to be keeping track of things like day or night or time passing in particular. The goal here of this chapter is for us to move through the wilderness, get to a settlement, and then when we're at the settlement, do some things there before we move on. Now, let's just, since we're here, let's see. The friendly giant begins with a very large club and 1d6 portions of dried mule meat. So we got 6 portions of dried mule meat. So we're going to note that down. And 6 mule meat. And each is going to restore 1d3 plus 3 wounds. D6 provisions in it. So let's see what we got. Let me roll the blue one. It's slightly easier to see. 5. So we have a total of 11 provisions. 11 provisions. Each is going to restore 1d3 plus 3 wounds. Probably the easiest thing to do, I didn't need to make this so big, is to just make a chart here. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. These are our provisions, and I suppose there's 2 ways of going about this. Right now, what I could simply do was I could roll 1d3 plus 3 11 times and allocate how much each was going to be provided for, and every time I used it, just check off that amount, or I could just do it as I go. I don't even really need to keep track of that. The giant's health, I did a roll for that already, is 2d6 plus 10, and I got a 17 for that. So it could have been better, but the giant's health is 17, druid's health is 10, and the witch hunter's health is just 8. One thing I forgot to do with the witch hunter is the witch hunter is going to begin the game with 1d6 magical amulets. So we will roll the dice first to see how many we get, and then roll again to see. I guess we could get up to 6. Wow, that's a lot. All right, well, we did roll a 6, so we get all of these. That seems a lot to me. That seems quite a bit. Let's see. Each amulet may be used once per adventure. Well, I mean, that's what we rolled. I don't know how I feel about that. That almost seems to be too much. But we have the 6 amulets to start, and let's see. I think that's where we have landed with everything, and we're going to begin now with finding out. We're going to be walking through the wilderness, and so we're going to move to figuring out what part of the wilderness we're in and what happens along the way. I'm going to be trying to stick as much as possible to what is here in Warhammer Quest. As you know, there's a million different ways of randomizing travel and environments, and I've talked about some of these on my channel, but for this I'm really going to be trying to stick as much as possible to this. So there's a travel table here, and it's not meant to be rolled on necessarily. I think you're just meant to decide how where you're going, but I'm going to assign values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to see what my destination is, and we're going to ignore the travel time because, as I said, I'm not keeping track of time, but I am going to be keeping track of the hazard rolls that I need to do. So let's see, first of all, is our destination going to be a village, a town, or a city? And it is rolling a lot of 6s right now, you know, when it's not particularly useful, but we'll see if that continues when it's a little bit more useful. So our destination is a city, and what this means is that to get there, we need to be rolling through moving through 6 hazards that along the way, and that's what's going to happen on our travel to the adventure site. So that's going to be a lot. This is the hazards table, and I believe it was actually this table that I had pulled out and used in a different video that was not on Warhammer Quest. So since I have had this one, I now have a whole bunch of other types of hazard tables. Oh, I need to do a little paperwork and give myself make up a chart here to determine which table I'll be rolling on. In order to simulate the travel, we were going to have to pass through 6 hazards as well as anything else that happens along the way. I've decided to make up a sequence of, not really so much a sequence of play, but a sequence of what's going on, just to remind myself that we are needing to deal with 6 hazards on our way to the magical city, and we're going to start with an event with the hazards that come right from the roleplay book. Usually I would create the situation of the environment, but I don't want to build up a whole wilderness environment and then pull an event that doesn't make sense with it. So I'm going to lead with that because, as I said, my goal here is mostly to be using material directly from the roleplay book. However, I do have these other traveling hazards tables that are a little more complicated. So for events 2 to 5, I'll be rolling on this D6 table and either getting a traveling hazard most likely or back to the original one, except on event number 6, I'm going to choose from a specific table called Out in the Sticks, which is meant to be events that happen on the sort of outlying city area. So this is going to help me thematically. It's not just going to be events, though. In between, I'm going to do, sort of saying a locale, story, action, other interactions. I'm not really sure, but something is going to be generically, or I should say organically, arising out of the event. So that's a brief overview of the structure. I don't know how much travel I'm going to get in this video because I don't want it to run too long, and because I rolled up 6, that's going to be quite a lot as it is. But we're going to start here with the hazards table that comes from the roleplay book, and this is, as are most or all of the tables here, one of these D66 tables. So we got the black and the blue, and we rolled up a 14. And we got it right here. The ground opens in front of the warriors, creating an impassable chasm many miles long. 3 choices. Abandon any hope, in which case they must go straight to the next adventure. Well, we're not going to do that. Go back to the caves they just left and start their journey again from scratch, taking a different route. No. Use any length of rope that they have to cross the chasm. If they cross the chasm with a rope, they may not take horses' carts with them and must discard the rope once they have safely reached the other side. All right, that's obviously the only option we've got. This gives us an early opportunity to use the rules from the role play book that dictate what happens when something is occurring in the world that's not just combat. And for those of you that either are following along or will obtain this someday, that's on page 157 of the role play book. I'm only going to highlight how this works. Essentially, what happens is that actions are mapped onto one of the various skills that or attributes that character has. Most often either strength, toughness, or initiative, but it could be others as well. And you get the benefit of your attribute there with potentially some modification based on what the action is, and it could be a plus or a minus, and also depending on the category or the class of your character. Now, I have assigned, I haven't done this mapping exactly for my characters, but in order to use this table and other things in the book, I have said that my giant has the barbarian class. That makes sense. My druid either is the elf or the wizard, depending on the scenario or the situation. I would pick the most beneficial. And the witch hunter is a dwarf. Now, additionally, they pick up and are carrying with them the standard, the lantern, the rope, the spells, and there's one other thing that they get for that. So we do have a rope with us, and I believe the dwarf is the one that has the rope. In this case, the roleplay book does give you some very specific actions, and it has its suggested modifiers, and it tells you what the test is against. And to succeed in a test, you're looking to roll a 7 or greater with 1d6 plus the modifier, plus your attribute. In this case, we do actually have, let's see if I can get it onto the film here, we actually have swing on a rope. And it says if the opportunity presents itself, a warrior might try to swing across a chasm, etc. on a rope. This requires a successful, quote, physical initiative test modified by the distance of the swing. So you're going to need to be obviously determining how much detail you want to put in here. I could, if I wanted to, but I'm not going to, take one of my tables here, and this is why I find this so useful. How far away is a thing? I could modify this and roll 2d4, which I don't actually happen to have out, to determine how far away this chasm is or how big this chasm is. And then based on that, I could increase or decrease the difficulty modifier. Now, the chart suggests difficulty modifiers. I've also made up my own little chart here for something that comes up that's not covered in the chart. And if something is easy or routine, I'm going to get a +2, average, difficult, impossible. I didn't make it that complicated. I also decided, per some suggestion in the roleplay rule set, that if you miss by just a 1 or a 2, it could be a yes, but. So you could have some kind of success with some implication, and then a 3+ is a failure. There is a provision for a catastrophic failure, which is if you happen to roll a 1 on your d6 when you're attempting the test. But for right now, we don't need to do too much. I'm going to skip over the detail of how far away that is. Well, you know what? Maybe I won't. Why not? I'm going to get some d4s, and let's just figure this out. So our warriors at the beginning of our adventure are approaching this chasm, and we're going to see that it is going to be, we rolled a 6, we got in the next room. So to me, I'm interpreting this as, you know what, it's not too bad. It's not too far away. It's a chasm, but it's not terribly far away. So I'm going to interpret that as having a modifier just of 0. It's average. These are warriors. They're carrying a rope already. They're adventurers. We're going to presume that they have some skill already at doing this test, and therefore I'm going to take any modification out, which will abandon this here. And the suggestion here for this swinging on a rope is to roll with your initiative. And what we're trying to do, again, for a success is to roll a 7. based on everybody's initiative here. So we'll start out with our witch hunter. The witch hunter is the one with the rope, and it's going to be shared by everyone. He's got an initiative, or she's got an initiative of 3. And so again, we're looking here now for a success to roll a 4, 5, or a 6 for her to get across, and she does. So she swings forward, the rope swings back, and it is grabbed by our druid. And the druid has an initiative of also 3. So once again, we're looking for 4, 5, or 6 for this average task, and success. As you would expect, it's average, 50% chance it's working out. Our druid and our witch hunter are sort of waiting on the other side of this chasm a little bit with bated breath, because you can imagine the big friendly giant swinging across on this rope, not going to have as great a chance, and indeed he's only got a +2 modifier, and if he only rolls a 3. This is a massive fail because we rolled a 1 total, the 2 with a modifier. That is a catastrophic fail. A catastrophic fail in this case would mean clearly that he swings on the rope, he's too heavy, he can't make it to the other side, and slowly, as he swings back and forth, he lets go of the rope with his hands and falls to the bottom of the chasm. He's going to be injured, and there is a rule that I found that he's going to inflict or incur 1d6 plus 2 wounds for every 10 feet that he falls. And we can do, if we want to, what we could do is just assign some values to this to see how far it is. But you know what? I'm going to keep things simple, and I'm going to simply say that it was a 10-foot chasm that he fell down. So he's going to incur 1d6 plus 2 wounds in that fall, and that is going to be 5 wounds on our giant. Unfortunately, he's got a health of 17, and now he's down to 12. Are the druid and the witch hunter able to, together with their strength and the rope dangling below, hoist their comrade, the giant, up? Well, we could simply say yes or no, or roll a dice, or what we could do is we could create our own test here. And clearly the test that we're looking for is value of strength. So they're working together, and they have a strength together of 3 plus 3. They have a strength together of a 6. However, I would say that this is certainly a difficult task to do. Not impossible, because they have their willpower, they have their drive to succeed, but it's difficult. So they're starting out with a value of 5, and they need to, for success, they need to roll a 7 or greater. So we are looking, again, catastrophic failure. Another catastrophic failure. And I mentioned earlier I was rolling a lot of 6s, and now it's coming back to bite me because I'm rolling a lot of 1s. So they are working and working and working to pull the giant up. What happens as a catastrophic failure? Well, I would say that what happens is one of them goes tumbling back down. Maybe not both. One of them goes tumbling back into the chasm with the giant. Which one? Well, we can just do a random here and see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who has fallen into the chasm? Unfortunately, it is the dwarf witch hunter. So now the dwarf witch hunter and the giant are in the chasm, and we have only the druid there to try to pull them out. Clearly, the druid has to go for the witch hunter first and attempt that on his own. Looking at the stats here, I'm going to say that that this is just going to be something of average difficulty. It's not a giant. That was definitely more difficult. So I'm going to say that we have no modification either way on this, and we are going to have just an average chance to do this. Well, folks, you've seen it here first. I rolled 3 6s in a row earlier when it didn't matter, and 3 1s, 3 catastrophic failures. I forgot to assign the damage value. Now, of course, obviously, everybody has fallen into this chasm. So my whole party is in a chasm now, but I need to assign the damage first. We're going to deal with that, and then we're going to see what happens with this. The druid's damage, again, we're rolling, it's a d6 plus 2 wounds for the fall, all right? So he has, that's 3 wounds, so he's down to 7 health. I realize I didn't give that much of a roll, but we'll stick with it. And the witch hunter, the witch hunter So how many wounds do they have? 5 plus 3. They're getting 8 wounds here. That is not great. The witch hunter is immediately down to 0 health. So we're going to see right now what happens with our various healing, because that is clearly the next thing that we need to take care of before we try to figure out how the heck to get out of this chasm. The druid is going to help out the witch hunter with her herb lore ability, and we're going to check out what happens there first. So it's a d6 table, and let us see what we're going to do. The druid is going to rub this foul-smelling salve into the companion's wound, reassuring him that even if the concoction does sting, it is going to do him good. And will it? We rolled a 2, and of course, guys, this is a great example of what can happen, and sometimes you feel like you're just bumbling around and nothing is going right. And this is one of those times, but we're going to stick with it. So we apparently have a bumbling party of the giant, the witch hunter, and the druid. And now I'm getting the theme here, which is they are pretty much incompetence. So such as it is, we attempted that. It did not work, but there's more. We have this ring of regeneration, and it's going to heal. It's going to heal us 1d6 of wounds if we're at 0. Now, you know, it feels a little bit. It's a one-time use. It feels a little bit wasted, but we've got to, because we can't possibly move on and attempt to get out of this chasm if somebody is knocked out. So we're going to heal the witch hunter. We only got 2 points back, but such as it is, the ring is gone. We've restored 2 wounds, 2 health to this. And now we are at the bottom of the chasm, and we need to figure out what to do. And this is a moment where I think I'm happy in a sense that this happened. It's taking up a lot of time at the beginning of the video, or the beginning of the wilderness travel, I should say, with just one event. But it's a great moment to think about options and how you create a story, what you want to do here. One option is to look around in detail and see what we see and whether that suggests something to us. Perhaps there is a crack in this chasm that we could walk out of. It's unlikely, it's possible. Could we somehow, do we have other tools and things that could get us out and climb back up? We really don't, because we're just starting out. We had our basic things. What about standing on the giant? The giant is probably 7 feet tall. Now we're only in a 10-foot hole here. Could we have the giant, have the witch hunter climb on the giant, and then have the druid come out? Is that possible? Well, that's totally possible. We could attempt that. We could attempt to crawl out, somebody with the rope, the stronger one with the rope. Let's see, who would that be? That's going to be the witch hunter, potentially. The witch hunter could climb out and try again to get the druid out. That's probably the most likely thing that they would try to do. They could look around. I could decide and say to you, all right, well, can I look around and find, do I see a crack in this chasm that could open up to a cave or something like that? I'm not going to do that, but let's just say I decided I wanted to. I would show you I have a number of different options. I could roll on this table, and if I rolled a 91 or greater, indeed there would be a cave entrance here, and they could go into the cave. Again, I could use this table, and it's sort of the opposite way. I'm only mentioning this to you as an example of one way to go. I want to get these guys, these bumbling adventurers that I'm already really enjoying, I want to see if they can possibly climb on this giant. Why else do I have a giant with me? Well, maybe his whole purpose is to get people out of this chasm. So we're going to attempt to climb up the giant and climb out in that manner. I believe there is actually a specific climbing skill here. So let me look for that and see. I was right. There is a climb on shoulders thing, and it actually says no tests need to be made. I was also wrong about my druid and my witch hunter basically have the same stats here for strength and initiative. What needs to happen is the druid can just climb up on the the giant's shoulders. No test needs to be made. However, when this witch hunter is climbing up, I need to test against initiative to see if this druid can remain standing, I guess, is the main point of it. So that is what I am testing on, and I get a 5, which is a minor failure. So I can say, well, you know, he's wobbly, but he's hanging on. That wasn't a major fail, and the witch hunter then is going to climb up and out and has the rope with him, and then attempt now to throw the rope down and to pull up the druid from this chasm, and then the two of them together are going to attempt to get the giant. So we're rolling a 2, and with our strength, that's a 3, that's a 5. This was a negative modifier, so that's a fail at a 2. So that is going to be, yes, he succeeds, but something happens. I think I'm going to say, let's see, maybe he could lose something. He doesn't really, you know, he just doesn't really have anything to lose as part of the problem. So I don't know what the implication of that would be. I guess the implication is, I will say that the witch hunter was able to pull the druid up, but in so doing, they both tumbled to the ground, and they both got one, they say they sprained their ankles. They both got 1 wound as a result of that. So it was a partial success, but we're going to give them some wound. And actually our witch hunter now is back down to 1. So we need to sort of deal with that. And the druid's health here is only, in fact, now at a 6. Plus, we still have the giant down below. Giant's down below. We have to try one more time to get this guy out. Otherwise, I'm not really sure what we're going to do. So I'm going to get rid of this dice because I'm not so happy with it. We're going to go back to this one. And we have a combined strength of 6. But again, this is a difficult task. So all we have now is the modifier of a +5, and we are looking for a 7 or greater to finally pull this guy out. Folks, seriously, I can't. I cannot. Anyway, yeah, that's right. I rolled another catastrophic failure. I did. It's frustrating. All right. Well, we've got the witch hunter and the druid out. We've got the giant who's still in there. I don't know what the catastrophic failure is going to be at this point for the giant. Well, actually, it's the catastrophic failure is on the witch hunter and the druid. I'm really not sure what to say about this. I think the catastrophic failure is going to be as follows. All of a sudden, they're going to be hearing a noise, a disruption in the bushes or whatever. We don't actually even know what environment they're in, but guess what? They're going to be encountering some kind of monster, and they're going to be forced to do combat without their strongest ally, the giant. It's really all I can think of at this moment because I want to move on. This is reminding me of, if any of you have played any Infocom games, one of my favorite early text adventures was Leather Goddesses of Phobos, and I'm having kind of flashbacks here to something I'm fairly certain it was in that game, where I was a gorilla trapped in a cage trying to get a banana to get the strength to get out, and I could not reach it, and I could not reach it, and that has stuck with me all these years, but now I'm having this kind of flashback about that. Anyway, this is the consequence. That's the catastrophic failure. I need to move on from here. We're going to leave the giant down in the chasm for the moment. I don't know how I'm going to handle that. But what I am going to tell you is that all of a sudden, as a distraction to do something else, and an enemy is going to come, and we're going to have to deal with the enemy. And so it'll give me an opportunity to show you how I work out these types of encounters in this kind of game. I'm going to keep things fairly straightforward, but I do want to give us a little sense of place here. And as you can see, I have really been making no notes. When I'm not doing this on video, I am much better about keeping things organized and whatever, but right now I'm just going to note that here we are in the chasm, and I'm going to go to my DM's guide just to give us a sense of a little bit what the weather might be. This is really more for atmosphere. I don't know if it's going to come into play necessarily, but we will. Let's first of all see what the precipitation situation is. We got a 30, so it's foggy. wherever we are is foggy, so we got that. And then we will be looking at what the other weather is, 27. I don't even know. Can you? Yeah, I guess you can sort of see these rolls here. So it's just normal weather for the season. So there's no important weather, so to speak, but it is foggy, and we are going to see out of the fog something's going to be coming toward us. But before that happens, I do want to see, and now we're in the Tome of Adventure Design. I just want to see a little bit if there's plant life around or whatever. I haven't really specified the overall terrain, but we've got a 79 here. So we have trees with long whiplash roots, and I'm going to say that it is possible that perhaps some of these long roots are hanging down into the chasm. Maybe that vine is going to help us. Maybe we're never going to be able to pull that giant out. Maybe the giant, under his own power, will be able to grab onto a tree root and pull himself out. That's a possibility. We're going to investigate that. But we see now that we are with some trees, and perhaps I should have investigated that before. We're going to see, are there any plants around and what might they be? 63, they have, they have some pods with minor healing properties. So that's helpful. And making a note of this off camera. I don't think you can see that. And let's see. We'll just see, we're skipping over the animals because I'm getting my animals and my encounters right from Warhammer Quest. But let's look and see if there's some strange, well, there is some strange terrain features. Why wouldn't there be? 16, there's fungus, mushroom, or moss. So there's some fungus, mushrooms, and moss. And this is making sense because it's a fetid environment. It has fog, and we're in this chasm with the giant, and there are these vines coming down. There's some fungus growing along, and let's see, we can get a little more information about that fungus and moss, and that information is 94. Well, it's surrounded by little small insects, and they're not they're not otherworldly or anything. There's a bunch of little insects here, so I'm not sure how much that told us. Off camera, I have made a few more indications of the environment here. We've got some craggy outcroppings of rocks. They have limited cover. There's maybe a 10% chance of trying to take cover in them, but the fog is relatively thick, so there's only visibility for a few feet. And there is, of course, this one big tree that's right by the chasm. It has long roots coming down, and it also has vines that could possibly be scaled to climb up. And this is the situation here. Our giant is down here. I'm not going to try to render that, but the giant is down here, and our druid and our witch hunter are up here hearing something coming toward them. Going to keep things simple, as mentioned, and simply roll on the level 1 monster table that comes from the roleplay book. I won't really be modifying it, except in the area of the number of enemies that are coming, because the options here of possibly encountering 1d6 plus 6 enemies for my party of 2 who are already wounded, that's not good. And for me, this is something where I'm going to be tinkering. Obviously, this whole thing is a tinkering, and in some cases I do more or less tinkering. And here, I don't want this to just be a rout and then everything's over. So there's going to be basically just one guy coming in. I did make up a quick table here, and this, I called it monster reaction, but it's not a monster reaction table. I was going to do that. This is just well, I guess it's a monster reaction, or it's a monster more encounter initially. When we see this monster, there are options that it may possibly flee, a small chance of it fleeing, a greater chance of it calling in a reinforcement. So there's actually a 25% chance of that happening, and other things, standing ground, charging, whatever. Obviously, there are many, many ways to round out the encounter, and perhaps that's just a whole video in and of itself, which I think I've touched on in other videos. But you could, as I was sketching out here, I'm not going to use this, but you could even make your own charts with, based on your terrain, your wilderness, the percentage of this being a monster or an animal, the percentage of it being some kind of NPC, or maybe the percentage of it being just an environmental impact, so something else happening. We've already dealt with the aftermath of some kind of earthquake, could be something else happening as well. This is clearly something that you could do it at greater or lesser level of detail throughout your session. But for the purposes of this, we're simply going to first we're going to roll and see what it is that we're hearing, and we're going to be seeing this thing not that far away. These are the wrong dice. This is another D66 table from the role play book, and we'll pick up our black and our blue dice, which I'm officially not rolling these anymore for individual tests in this game. I'm going to find something else, but for the purposes of this, once again, a 44. I think I rolled that. For something else, but maybe that was another game. In any case, what is a 44? Well, a 44 is going to be, well, there's two things here actually. There's a goblin and a goblin shaman. So I only wanted to get one thing, but there's two here, so we're going to stick with those guys. And let's see, we need to see this goblin. We need to do a roll here to see what it is armed with. So it is armed with, again, once I get my 6, when it doesn't really matter, it's got a spear. So the goblin's got a spear, and the shaman, we have some information there. We'll need to confirm what that is. And now we can see, could they possibly be calling in a reinforcement? Let's hope not. What might these guys be doing? So this is just my own table. I made it a D100, and well, we'll roll on that and see what we get there. And we rolled a 14. So they are curious, and they are open to interaction. Interesting. All right. They're curious and open to interaction. This situation gives me a chance to show you how I might use some of these tables that I've got. Clearly, we've got our giant in the hole, and they're coming out of the fog, but they are open, they're curious to talking about us, they're not aggressive. So I'm going to say it's somewhat likely that they're going to help us. When we talk to them, we're going to ask them for help and to get this giant out. I'm going to say it is somewhat likely that they'll help us. And indeed, we rolled a 34. So yes, they are going to help us get the giant out of the hole. And now I need to figure out exactly how they can do that. I have other tables. There are other ways that I could have gone, and I'll just show you some of them. So for example, could have used this table. Again, I would have been, it's sort of the opposite, rolling to see, I would have said it was likely that they would help us. And then I also have, they have one more table. This one I haven't shown you. This is a D20. This comes from the Solo Adventurers Toolbox here, where you have your modifier to the D20 roll, and you come out with, there's a large chance of a maybe here, but in this situation, you could have had, say, a negative modifier. It was possible that they would help us because they're open to us, or maybe even it was likely because the description said that they were curious and open, and then you would have just rolled the D20 and dealt with those results. But went with a simpler one here, which was whatever I just did, my basic go-to. Never remember where I got this table from, but this is sort of my default table. And yes, we are going to get some help finally to get this giant out of the chasm, and we need to see what the deal is with this shaman and maybe how he can help us. The goblin and the druid are talking and agree that the goblin will attempt to use some of his magic to help. Now, the magical skills given here for the goblin shaman are going to have to be modified because they're mostly aggressive ones. But let's see what he pulls out of his little bag here. And this is a table where you add the values. So a 4 and a 1 in this case is a 5. Here we go. The shaman floods his allies with power. All orcs and goblins on the board get +1 attack this turn and +1 toughness next turn. All right. Well, we're going to interpret this to mean that the strength value, the goblin is going to cast a spell over everybody and aid in pulling the giant out because the The vines that are down there that we discovered sort of after the fact have not been working. So we are going to attempt with the goblin, the shaman, the druid, and the witch hunter to pull this guy out. Now, I mentioned earlier that when I had my witch hunter and my druid working together, I added their strength values. The rules, as in the roleplay book, state that when you have an additional character aiding, you don't add the whole value, you just add a point value of 1. So given that we're going to have so many people helping here, and we already have an additional value of 1 to everybody for the strength value based on the magic that was just cast, that's where I'm going to go. So I think this is actually going to be an automatic success. So we're going to pull together here. Our goblin shaman has a strength of 3. That's going to be the baseline value. And then we're going to get, so we have 3. We're going to get 1 for everybody else. That would be the goblin, the druid, and the witch hunter. Did I leave anybody out? No. Plus we get the value of 1. I think it said for, let's see, all, well, orcs and goblins on the board, so that's going to get the goblin and the shaman, and that's going to be, unless I've done the math wrong, they're all going to pull together and with the rope that they have, and finally hoist the giant out of this chasm, and they all come tumbling around together and end up in a big heap by the side of the chasm at last. Well, that was sort of fun and exhausting, and I'm going to end by using something from the Solo Adventurers Toolbox that I didn't actually talk about when I did that video, but it's a table, it's called a situations table, and I quite like it. And it's meant to be used in kind of any random situation where you want a sense of direction, a narrative direction of where to go. And the way it works is, well, the way I'm using it is you're first rolling a d10 to get the hundreds range, and then you're rolling a d100. But I'm just going to do one roll here with the white die being the first one. So this brings us to a 420 on this verb table. It's a table of 500 verbs. 420 brings us to scavenge. Here we are, scavenge. So we have the giant, the witch hunter, the druid, the goblin shaman, and the goblin all together in a heap. They've tumbled out and they're kind of looking at each other. And the next thing that they're going to do, and now we are moving into, we have solved the first, that was all just the first hazard. And we're going to move back to the overall outline that I made to show you what was happening. So that whole thing was getting us to solve the first event, and then next we come into what I was calling the locale, the other interactions or actions section, maybe searching, exploring, whatever. And what has been suggested to us by the verb table that we are meant to do now is to scavenge around where we are. So what we would be doing next, although I'm going to end this video now, and maybe this will be part 1, I don't know, but I think this gives a good demo of how I'm working with this in any case, even if I don't do another video. Where we would go next in a hazard event section is to focus on scavenging around, maybe rolling on some tables, maybe we'll find some stuff, I don't know. Remember, we're starting out, our party is starting out without very much, so it would be nice to be able to get some things. And then after we do that, we're going back to my table here, and we are rolling on this d6 table that I have made, which will determine which of the traveling hazards or regular hazards table we get to, and then we would roll on that as we move on to try to get to this magical city. Again, we have to conquer or deal with 6 hazardous events. This whole video was just the first one. Thanks for watching.